Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Aquarian Mind podcast. Today's podcast, episode number 21. I'm your host, Jamel Crothers. It's Book Insight Friday, but today I am not going to be talking about a book this week. So, what am I going to talk about? How I get my book ideas. I don't want to leave that out, right? So, I'm going to delve into that aspect of my journey as an author. Now, every once in a while, I talk to, someone who really wants to know how my mind works, right? I was fortunate enough to be able to talk to a few people who asked me that one question: how do I get my book ideas, right? So it's a process on how all of this works, and a lot of times it can be me just thinking and brainstorming, or it can be something that happens in the world. There are times where, excuse me, I'll have a conversation with someone about the world, and then the light bulb goes off, and before you know it, a book idea comes to mind. Now, if you don't know by now, I write everything in books pretty much in a nutshell. And occasionally I'll put stuff in my phone, but eventually it transfers from my phone to my book, and then the note gets deleted out my phone, right? So I pretty much have a book that goes with me everywhere I go. Now, as I've discussed in previous podcasts, this book that I write in, it pretty much has every idea, how my brainstorm sessions begin and end, and how I formulate chapters, things of that nature. But then there's also the observation of the world, what has happened recently, and what could potentially happen. And, sometimes when, certain things happen in the world, that's, when the light bulb may go off, and that's how I'll get a book idea that'll come to me. Now, I'm not necessarily fixated on a specific societal issue. I write about pretty much anything and everything that I can, and in a respectable way and manner. There are certain things that I don't want to write about and I don't want to discuss because it's not my place to write those things. I am in a process of tackling women's issues, and I'm not going to thread the needle with it. I'm going to, write about certain things and bring more positivity to situations, and bring more of discussion, to some of these women's issues. A young lady growing into a woman, and the things that, haven't been told to her yet, but her mother is writing these things to tell her, you know what I'm saying? That's a book that I've just, pretty much finished writing recently. Another woman's issue that, really never really gets discussed enough is postpartum depression, which can occur, while a woman is pregnant and after a woman has had a child. So, certain ideas like that. But then when it gets down to, topics like abortion, not my place. You know what I'm saying? So, that's, where, I have to draw the line and say, no, I can't go there. Right? So these are, how, my book ideas kind of come along, And it gives me the flexibility to write about different subjects that I feel strongly about, And a lot of people, are not going to like the way I format my books and how I write them and things like that. But here's my reality. I don't expect the whole world to like my writing and how I write my books, right? There's nothing wrong with being different. And sometimes people don't like different, which is okay. Everyone has their preferences of wanting to read things the traditional way. when you get used to certain things, it's pretty much what you want. You're set in your ways, whether it's, you know, how you go about life, and reading books. So I write this way because there aren't enough books and stories that, discuss these things, right? And a lot of books, these days have the fairy tale endings, everyone lives happily ever after. And that's not always the case. That's really not reality, So, certain book ideas come to mind, and then at some point they're bound to be written. And I definitely write books about the state of the world at the present time, but the biggest part of my writing journey and my books are that a lot of my books can be read now, but then also in the future. So for me, getting these book ideas, I have to think to myself, are my books going to be something that can be read now and in the future? So sometimes a book idea may come to me, I may, jot it down and, think it over and come back to it later. And sometimes I may think to myself, well, this book can be in the moment and it may not work. Now, a prime example of that is America, A Country Divided. Like, that was a book published in 2017. That's where the state of the world is. Now the world's different 4 years later, and some stuff may not apply now. Some stuff still does apply, right? So that's like a book where, you're kind of teetering with it and saying, well, it works now, but it may not work later. And that's okay. But when you start to look at, the Struggles and Growth of a Man series, there's always going to be men's issues in the world. The Women's Worth series that I'm currently working on for 2022, those are things that are going to be discussed now and continue to be discussed in the near future. So, I have to think about the longevity of this, and that's the game for me. It's a longevity game. It's impacting people now, but also in the future. Like, I want my content to forever live on. And, there are certain books, in Black history that were written years ago, but they're going to resonate in the future, right? And that's what I want it to be, And honestly, I want to share these things with you because everything for me in regards to my writing, my podcasts, blogs, clothing line, impacting people, helping people, there's a purpose and reason for everything. So that's why I want to share a lot of these things with you. I try my best to allow you guys to get inside of my mind. Now, my books, they're available pretty much everywhere. My website, which is aquarianmindwrites.com. They're available on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, Apple iTunes, and a whole bunch of other places. But also keep in mind that I've, recorded a few audiobooks also. So if you are an audio person, you can access my stuff on my website. Or, if you're following me on Instagram, it's Aquarian Mellow on Instagram. I have a link where you can click onto and you can get access to pretty much anything and everything. Website, Amazon, audiobooks, YouTube page, this podcast, anything and everything, right? So, my ideas will come at the most random times. So, Kids with Guns came along after the Parkland shooting that happened in Florida, unfortunately. And then, you start backtracking and, looking at the Virginia Tech shooting and the San Bernardino. And then I started researching Columbine, which happened when I was way younger. And, so, you have to start, Then you start delving deep into all these things, and then you start to formulate those storylines, and you start creating, the characters that needed to be, in a story like that. And I wrote that in a way that no one would ever think to write it. So I went in a completely different direction. Struggles Growth of a Man, that came along on a flight home from Los Angeles. And then before I knew it, after I wrote that, and after I wrote that book, published Code Blue Part 1, and then The World We Live In Part 1, then I, light bulb went off, and, after reading an article, and I turned that into a series, finished that series, then turned the rest of the Code Blue into a series, and then turned the rest of the World We Live In into a series. Code Blue, self-explanatory, but that book idea, that was honestly a standalone book. No intentions on really stretching the story with Gary. And, I found a way to stretch it, and I started researching, former cases that have happened, on police forces and in other government agencies. And, before I knew it, I had a series. And then I started, playing around with, the character, Gary's character, and who he is, and and it's his journey. And I incorporated his son into it, and his wife, and things like that. So the ideas just continue to come, and the storylines become more believable. The World We Live In, that's a series that was the most emotionally driven one, and it was more emotional than honestly writing I Woke Up a Black Man, because I Woke Up a Black Man, that's just life experiences that I've dealt with on my own, along with friends, and seeing unarmed black men being killed, right in front of my eyes. And that's been happening since I was a kid living in the inner city of New York. And, learning, that there is a lot of, bad police officers. And, I watched Rodney King, get beat on my TV screen. I watched Sean Bell on my TV screen get killed, and Amadou Diallo and things like that. I grew up in an area not too far from where Sean Bell was killed. So, I Woke Up a Black Man, that was just an easy write. It was just turning 32 chapters into a more condensed 20 chapters to where it made sense. So back to The World We Live In, which was what I was originally talking about. That book idea came along with, just seeing a lot of things and seeing a lot of what the world is, and a lot of people dealing with a lot of different issues, from drug addiction, alcohol addiction, gambling addiction, things like that. And, being able to formulate stories and put myself in those people's shoes, and those types of struggles and homelessness that goes on all over the world, not even just here in the United States alone. So I was able to formulate 19 characters and make it a series. And those are more of my longer books. And so thankful that I was able to write that series. But it really took a toll on my mind, and the creativity as I progressed in that series. I was able to really, write some meaningful content to where it's going to impact and affect people down the road. And some of that stuff is tear-jerking stuff, and I felt that I really needed to write those kinds of things. And yes, these things are written about, but they're not written in a way to where you're fully going to feel, these characters. And, out of, you've got 19 different characters, but my goal is to at least, get you to feel and understand at least one of these characters' plights. So, those are just a few of the things that I wrote about in that series. There are so many other, subject matters that I wrote about, and it hit you hard. the start of that series, it's a gut punch. So it's like you have to be, mentally and emotionally prepared to read a series of that magnitude. I'll say that. Living life to the fullest, that came along, through experiences that, I've dealt with in life. And I see, so many social media posts of people just, dragging and, down and out and things of that nature. And, we tend to take life for granted. And, the goal for me was to get you to think about what would happen if you found out the day you were going to die. But, I mean, granted, we don't honestly know. We don't know how we're going to go. We all would like to go in our sleep and peacefully, but that may not happen for all of us, and we're on borrowed time. I mean, I know, at least for me, I know I am. I mean, I don't know about the rest of you guys, but that's how I approach life a little bit. So, writing that, I had to make sure that I brought out these characters, and there's some good elements of surprise, let's say, in living life to the fullest, right? Trying to think of other series or anything else that I've written. I've written like so many books, so I apologize right now as I sit here and process things in my head. America Under Mind Control, right? I look at it as how we live our lives and how we get sucked into a lot of things that just really don't matter, We get sucked into this individualistic, materialistic type of lifestyle that we want to live. And, we don't fully understand, the history of this world and who really runs the show and why, and, how wars are started, and, just a lot of different things that, I delved into a little bit, did some research. I didn't fully go full on out and full fledged. But that's because there are other books in relation to, some of the things that I talked about in the beginning of the book. So, it's, talking about credit card debt and, student loan debt and, the holidays and how much, we shop and buy things for, people, and, all this money spending that we do for, unnecessary reasons, and the mentalities that we have and that we deal with. So, that was a book idea that, kind of came to me, and I questioned whether I wanted to write part 2 to that, but then I felt like if I did, it would ruin all that I put into with part 1. So I figured I would, create another book title and write something else, which ended up being America, A Country Divided, which I already spoke about. And then, The World in Ruins. Look, nature is being completely destroyed by us on an everyday basis. And thankfully, we're getting to a place where we're trying to make the world better, but there aren't enough of us trying to do it, And I know that I'm not doing enough. And I know that somewhere along the lines, I have to figure out, how to do more. And, I spoke of, a lot of bad things that are going on around the world. And, it's negative and it's bad, but there has to be, some sort of, engagement on these things. And, people need to be aware, of what's going on around us. Even if you choose not to watch the news, there's got to be some sort of way of people knowing what's going on. So for me to write a book like that, it wasn't the greatest thing, for me to write, but it felt good to get out those things. So, my book ideas come randomly. I can be eating, I could be in the shower, I could be out with friends, I could have a conversation with somebody, I can be texting somebody, I could be watching a YouTube video, I could be watching online church. I could be laying in bed at night, getting ready to go to sleep. And these are just all the different times and instances where I've gotten book ideas and they've come to me. So, for me as a writer, things come to me at any given time. And any sort of creative, whether they're a writer, a musician, an artist, anything in the creativity realm, film, acting, whatever, ideas will come to you at the most random times. You just have to be prepared for it, because honestly, we as creators, we're built for this. I mean, I know that I am, especially, after all that I've done these past few years. It's been fun. There's been struggles, obviously, but it's still fun at the end of the day. So what I'm saying is that, my book ideas come to me when the time is right, when it's needed. And, some of these books are going to get written and some of them aren't. And that's just the way it goes. So with that said, that is my podcast for today. I thank you guys for listening. I hope you guys have a great and productive weekend. Stay tuned next week. More content is coming as always. So with that said, be good everyone, and go accomplish your goals.